everybody, welcome to this Q&A panel sponsored by ReadPop's Metaverse Digital Programming. I am Eric Kallenborn. I will be your moderator for today. This is an amazing panel. What we did is we collected questions off of social media from teachers and librarians to throw out to this group today to just answer what you would have answered at a Comic-Con, right? Just to get those questions and things you're worried about. In this particular panel, we're going to focus a lot on distance learning and e-learning, considering most teachers and librarians are going through those things right now. So we'll tackle a lot of those issues. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at comics_teacher. I am theothercomicbookteacher.com, and I just started a YouTube channel where I am reviewing 5 books a week. And that is, if you go to YouTube and type comics teacher, you will find me. Give me a subscribe. Every Friday at noon, those come out. So I'm going to throw it to our panelists who are going to describe themselves, let you know what they have going on in their lives right now, and then we'll get into this discussion. So I'll just go clockwise from where I'm sitting here in my boxes. Michael, you are up first.
Hi, my name is Michael Gianfrancisco. I'm a high school English teacher and adjunct professor of English that I'm located in the Providence, Rhode Island area. I'm also a member of the educational cohort LitX, of which Eric, Ronell, and Adam are also members. We are a teacher group that is dedicated to using 21st century texts in the classroom. You can follow me on Twitter at TryingTeacher, and you can follow LitX at WeAreLitX.
Thank you, Michael. Midi?
Hi, I'm Midi Cheng. I am an author and illustrator. My graphic novel, Katrina, is back here, and I want to grab it right now. Came out in 2017. I have another graphic novel coming out next year called Jukebox, and I also illustrate picture books. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us. Regine.
Hi, I'm Regine Sawyer. I am the owner, writer, creator at Lock It Down Productions. I produce action, science fiction, fantasy, and horror comic books. I'm also the coordinator and founder of the Women in Comics Collective International, WINC for short, and we highlight the merit and craft work of women and non-binary people of color working in the comic book industry. And we have our own comic book convention in New York City called WINCCon that happens every year.
Awesome. Thank you for being here with us today. Adam.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Ebert. I am a secondary educator in the south suburbs of Chicago. I'm also a reading specialist. I've been working with LitX for as long as I've been a teacher, trying to incorporate 21st century material and text into my classroom. And I am Mr. Adam Abort on Twitter. Adam like you're splitting atoms, and abort like you're aborting the mission. And I'm just happy to be here.
Thanks, Adam. And Ronell.
Hey, I'm Renee Whitaker. I am the curriculum director at a South Suburban high school in Chicago. I have lots of plug. I'm just going to plug my Instagram and my Twitter. I'm at Mr. Whitaker on Twitter and at the Comic Book Teacher on Instagram.
All right, thank you, everybody. So we're going to get right into this. I have the questions here on my phone. The first one is, and these are all great questions. I want to thank everybody out there who submitted a question to us. These are fantastic. Students have recently been hit with a whole wave of new mental and physical issues, many for the first time in their lives. Can you recommend any comics that address current themes of life, like pandemic, insecurity, and government, public health, social, physical isolation? There's a lot of things right now, sudden loss of resources, etc. So can we throw out any possible titles that deal with any of these things? Nidhi, did you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. I ran around my house. I have books everywhere, as any author, I think, does. This is my little stack. But top of my list that I felt like was really related that I think came out this year is When Stars Are Scattered by Victoria Jameson and Omar Mohammed. It's really an amazing, very relatable to right now. It's really being without resources, I think, and kind of isolated and bored. And I think it gives a lot of really good perspective of how you can find a lot to relate to it in what we're living through right now, but also, they're refugees in a refugee camp. And so to kind of almost have something that you can relate to, but also, really expose yourself to a different experience too. So But yeah, I have like a whole stack, and I could talk about these forever. But there's so many great books that have come out and that are related to things. But also I feel like, you know, there are new experiences that kids are going through. And I think escape is also really essential. You know, I mean, comics provide such a great way of escaping. One of my favorite series to read with my 5-year-old is Hilo. And there's like 7 books, I think, now. So those are also really fun to just, you know, not focus too much on what we don't, what we can't do. So yeah, those are just some for me.
Yeah, I wanted to hop on. I'm glad that Nidhi said that, because the first thing I was going to say was, you know, if kids get in front of you and the first thing you want to do is read pandemic comics, like, you might want to pause on that. Like, I think there's some opportunity there to read some books that might address things like how to deal with anxiety and stuff like that. There are some really cool, you know, current event comics coming out of the Nib. I like the Nib as far as like nonfiction stuff. You do a lot of stuff from a pretty diverse group of creators that are, you know, discussing all these different topics. But one thing I think that we're really pressing it right now, at least, you know, for my kids, I'd like to put John Lewis's March in front of some kids. I think it's an opportunity to engage in a discussion around the things that are happening in the world, without possibly saying, like, you know, let's sit down and talk about Black Lives Matter, like on a backwards chair or something like that, right? So it's just like an opportunity, you know, to engage with kids in a thoughtful way rather than, you know, this pandering way, I think.
Anybody else want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, you know, definitely the Nib. Ronell's suggestion was something that I was gravitating towards, in that it's contemporary, it's current, right? So they're continuously generating content about things that are happening day in and day out in our world. I know something that I read kind of over our summer really stuck with me, that I think, you know, again, with Ronell said, maybe we don't want to necessarily throw exactly what we're encountering in our students' heads, but something like Stepping Stones by Lucy Knisley, I thought was a really a great read in terms of encountering things that are new, encountering kind of growing pains, encountering you know, where you maybe don't fit in, or where you don't get along with the people that you're kind of stuck with. So, you know, having those conversations about, like, when we're around people we don't like, or we're encountering things that were new, or if we feel like maybe the adults in our lives aren't necessarily listening to us, what can that look like? So I know that definitely being something to read with, you know, your elementary and middle grade students. I know Here, which is a recommendation from Eric that I got, which is Richard McGuire, I believe, is all about kind of being in one place, which is kind of what a lot of us have been, right? And this, what does this location look like, kind of spread out over time, which also a book that I read kind of pre-quarantine was Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing, which one of the things that was touched upon there is, like, what is the physical space that we live in, and what is our relationship with that physical space? You know, even just seeing, like, you know, who are the other people that live in your neighborhood? What are their houses like? What is the wildlife and the nature that lives around our houses every day? And just being kind of one with this place that we're more or less stuck in as of quarantine. So yeah, I think, you know, understanding the physical space that we're finding ourselves in, when a lot of times we can get lost in the phones and other screens that we're surrounding ourselves with. I know, leaning into a little bit of the heavier side, Hostage by Guy Delisle, I think, if I'm not butchering his last name, is just, again, this going into a little bit more of the darker side of isolation and those thoughts when, you know, we can't leave a space. Obviously his is more of a forced isolation, and not necessarily this kind of self-chosen isolation, but I know that's something that kind of stuck in my head. And then finally, and it seems weird because it's always something that I feel like gets overturned because it's one of the original, like, comics, graphic novels, but Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, I think is something of, like, here's a young person dealing with all of these things going on in where she lives, in her family, in her own personal life, and how she kind of deals and what she thinks about all of those things. So I know Persepolis just being kind of at the forefront of this whole comics in the classroom movement kind of gets lost, but when I was kind of reflecting on that, I thought that was something that would be a perfect text to bring up now.
That's deep, Adam. That's no, seriously, that idea of, like, staying in one spot and, like, finding a home when you're, like, here, you know, and that's that could be a really interesting like thematic unit that a teacher starts a year off with. It's like, what does it mean? What are the artistic and poetic ideas in here? Yeah, I like that. Anybody else?
I could throw a few titles in, some of which are, you can talk about social emotional learning specifically, like for the younger kids, Small Things by Mel Tregoning, which is, I think it's like a wordless graphic novel about child anxiety. I wish I had it. It's actually in my classroom, which this is not my classroom. This is a fake background of my classroom behind me. But it's in my classroom. It's worth looking at. I think Hey Kiddo by Jarek Krasotska is another really great book for younger kids and coping with the issues of, and we saw a pretty big jump in domestic violence during the pandemic and the lockdown, and that's part of what Hey Kiddo deals with to some degree. So bringing attention to that as well. I Kill Giants is always going to be a book on my big list. And very recently, Raina Tegelmaier's Guts, which just, I think, won an Eisner, is really very heavily focused on anxiety and how it manifests physically in kids. And as far as, maybe a book, if we want to give kids a book to kind of help them escape, I'm going to go with, like Adam, one of the classics that doesn't get mentioned as much anymore is Bone by Jess Smith. It's a really great series for kids. My son really likes it. He also likes the Hilo series too, Nitty, and I'm waiting for the new book. That I think there's a new one coming, right? Focusing on one of the other characters in the book. If you want to, if you want kids just to really enjoy reading, and you don't want to give them heavy stuff, we want to kind of lighten things up for our students and help them escape a bit. That's another really good choice.
Regine, did you want to throw out a title or two?
Yeah, I had to just move my location a little bit. Of course, while I'm talking to you guys, there's blowers in the neighborhood. But there's several book series out of Fanfare Publications, and they have like really terrific books on children, how they deal with trauma, and they do it in this like entertaining way, but also in a way in which that you can digest, not just as a child, but as an adult. Like I enjoy reading them as well. And one book in particular that I really enjoyed, I believe it's called Mother or My Mother. And it's just about this young boy just dealing with the trauma of losing his mother while still just living his life, still enjoying being a kid, but still having to deal with that trauma. So it's a very thoughtful book. I liked it so much that I had shared it with my mother when it came out.
That might be, out of all the panels I've ever done, like the single best round of recommendations. Like that was an amazing round of recommendations. I'll throw out a fun one that also deals with some small issues too, would be just Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I mean, you have this character who's going through these things and basically in the town, that Toronto that he lives in. Granted, it's not a pandemic, but it's his own sort of struggles, but it's also super fun and creative. I don't recommend that one for the classroom enough, but I love those books. All right, second question here we'll throw out. And this is a good one. I've been getting this one myself too from teachers. When we're distance, what is the best way to actually get comics and graphic novels to students? Is there a practical way to share them digitally without students needing special apps or accounts like a Kindle or an Amazon? So when we're trying to get books and comics to students during distance learning, any recommendations to do that? Open?
I can start that one. I think the first thing is talk to a librarian, your librarian, librarians. I recently moved from one library to the other library, and quarantine, I just went online, got a new library card, didn't even get a physical one, just got all those resources digitally. So talk to, whether that is like your town's librarian, your school's librarian, or kind of resource person, media resource person, and see what's available. You know, from one library to the next, there might be different digital resources. I know even something like Hoopla or Libby or Overdrive might be something that a school might have. So especially if you're going one-to-one with technology, I think that's a great resource. I think also, you know, it gets tough when you're getting into like DRM-free and PDF things and copyright. But I know Gumroad.com, where I've gotten a bunch of comics and zines, usually offer PDFs. However, you know, I would definitely make sure that you like say, you know, contact that person and say, hey, I'm sharing this with my students. I'm doing this for educational purposes, making sure that that's like clear before you do that, especially if you're kind of, you know, sharing a PDF. And then if anything, and I've done it before, is screencasting the books. You know, we could talk a little bit more about like the visual aspect of remote learning and the visual aspect of kind of comics, but just kind of like, let's look at a page or let's look at a scene from this graphic novel together. Let's talk about it, and kind of just present it, you know, instead of just having students look at your, you know, beautiful mug. They can be looking at some pages of a graphic novel. So that's what I'm thinking about, especially as I'm heading into August and September. So yeah, I know it's tough.
Adam, what was that website that you recommended?
Gumroad.com.
Gum or gun?
Gum with an M.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I can add. This is something oh, I'm sorry, Ronald, do you want to? Okay. I'm teaching a full year graphic novel course this year, and one of the concerns that our district has is in distribution of physical materials for obvious reasons. You know, with transmission issues, they're trying to figure out the best way to handle that, and it hasn't been, you know, completely decided yet. They're very cautious, and I as a parent in the same district, I am very glad that they are. As a teacher, it raises new challenges because I do have class sets of books that I would like to distribute to the students, but I don't know how that's going to work yet. So a digital option is something that I am actively seeking now. I recently tweeted out to some publishers, if we own a class set, wonder if the publishers will allow us to use PDFs until we're allowed to eventually distribute those class sets. I haven't got an answer. One publisher did reach out to me and is going to look into that for me. So that, follow my Twitter and I'll let you know how that works out. That may be an option. Like if your district has ordered the books, but you can't give them out, you might be able to choose a PDF option. Or if you haven't ordered the books, a PDF or some kind of a digital license might be a more inexpensive way to get the books anyway. Some publishers may offer discounts if you're just using digital versions and they're not actually getting physical copies of the books. There's also webcomics that you can find all over the internet. You can just Google the word webcomic and you'll find hubs that will take you to hundreds of different webcomics that are generated by artists all over the world that you can access as well. And also independent authors who self-publish their books. If you reach out to them individually, and this is a great way, I think, to get these new undiscovered artists, you know, into the mainstream by giving their work to our students. Maybe that you can work deals with them as well. You know, they control their own, intellectual property, so maybe they'll be willing to do something for students. So I'm going to keep working on this. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of, I think, combine both of those points. I think we might be talking about webcomics a little bit later, but webcomics is probably your best bet at this point. The cool thing about webcomics is I would maybe add a couple of adjectives to that search, Michael, because you search just webcomics, some things could come up that might not be classroom appropriate. So figure out what's good for your class. I'll give a list of some cool ones later, but I think webcomics will be really cool. And a lot of the books that have been recently published, you know, kind of started out as webcomics. One of the ones I'm going to recommend is Witchy. That's a book now. Crossing Cheshire, or Cheshire, however you say it, that's one that started off as a webcomic. I think there's like 27 pages that are open for free. But what's really cool about the pandemic that's been like interesting is like how the community takes care of itself. I kind of got really involved with littlefreelibrary.org. If you live in a metropolitan area, some places they have like, you know, these folks who are kind enough to put a little free library out on their lawn. You can go and just dump books in there. And that's been like a cool way because I'm someone who hates to have physical things, except for Pops. And I just like to go there and just dump a bunch of books in those. If you go on littlefreelibrary.org, you can't necessarily look for like what books are there, but you can get a map of where those little free library things are located. And at the very least, you can go and borrow some cool possible books. And if you live in the Chicago South Side area, you might stumble upon some Fantastic Four graphic novels or something like that.
A couple things really quick onto your guys' points. I would also I'm compiling a list right now of really good Instagram artists that are posting like daily or weekly comics that you can just subscribe to their Instagram and then kind of pull that up. So as a teacher, you can just say, all right, if we're on Instagram, go ahead and head to so-and-so. Now, a couple things I want to talk about. One, that means parents have to be okay with kids having Instagram on their phone. So you can't guarantee that that's going to happen. Michael said something about the library, right? So I am trying to work with my local library as well. But the problem is our local librarian has tried to come in to the high school and give every kid in the school a library card. But the community is like, no, we don't want to do that, because you may have some kids in the high school who maybe don't live in that address or maybe don't live in that town, because we have multiple towns that come into the high school. So the library is like, well, we don't want to spend our funds on students not in our community, right? Or people not in our community, which we're trying to break through. That was a little while ago. We're trying to break through that. But you will find some barriers just by saying, all right, so we all have a library card, right? We can't assume that everybody has a library card, which is a shame, but something you need to keep in mind as well. I am, though, working to create a bigger digital distribution list with our school librarians. So the media center people at our school are amazing, and they're really trying to kind of build up what it looks like for teachers to kind of borrow digital books for their students these days. So yeah, there are options out there, but there's sometimes some roadblocks we're going to get into. But this next question I want to toss out. Oh, Rana, I'm sorry.
I just want to add too, I'm going to put my administrator hat on now. One of the tools I know we have access to is Overdrive. Overdrive is like when it's more specific to high school and school librarians. And they have some options that are a little bit less cost prohibitive. So you can buy like classroom sets of digital books on there for like maybe between $1 and $5 a kid. Again, it's a library license. So once that kid's done with that book, it expires. But I mean, just think about like, that's, potentially $30 for a classroom of 30 kids to have access to one book. That's an option you can look at too.
Thank you. Regine.
I was just going to say there are a few websites that do provide free comics. And also some of the larger companies have, they have some platforms where you can get read unlimited comics, such as DC Universe. So if the school could get like a membership to DC Universe is about $7 a month, and you can get copies of all their entire library of comics, graphic novels, and such. There's also a website, I probably shouldn't recommend it, but I'm going to recommend it anyway. It's called readingcomics.com, and it's a ton of free comics, like a ton. But the reason why I am suggesting is because I know how tight budgets are in the school system. When I was working for a couple of different schools for a bit, teaching graphic novel creation, and I brought a lot of comic books to the school. And that's also a benefit if you can work with a comic book creator who can get like comp copies or can link you with a publisher, and they can send schools comp copies. Like, you don't necessarily have to pay for it, you just have to ask the right people. So there's also those options as well.
Nini?
I think one of the things that's interesting is a lot of publishers will have these apps. So we actually use this app. I don't know how many comics are on here, but it's called Epic. And our school, or my daughter's preschool, got a school copy of it, I guess. And then you just download the app on a phone or on an iPad or whatever device. I think you can also get it on the computer, and then you log in to the school. So the school has paid for it, and then you have access to all, it's like an enormous amount of books. I don't know how many comics are on there, but they have comics on there too. So it's interesting to see that, like, you could ask for individual titles, but I think a lot of publishers are also operating these apps that have kind of like their wealth. You pay a subscription as a school, and then your classroom can access it. So it kind of mitigates some of those issues of like getting individual copies or individual books, and you just end up getting access to a lot of things. And then you as a teacher have to curate that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, you know, within all the kind of library discussion, is it's interesting, at least in our district, they, over the last couple of years, have gotten rid of fines. And so what I've seen and what I've talked to other librarians about is this idea that, you know, kids who used to use the library and then got fined and then no longer use the library. I think that's an important discussion to have in this new space of, like, you know, you need the library, lean on the library. Is that, did you know, like, find out, you know, that fines are no longer relevant. So if you had a library card that you're not using because you're afraid, because you have, you know, like, I mean, I think it's a huge barrier for kids who have fines. And if your district has gone away from that, especially right now, it's important to talk about. So I just want to mention that.
I think that's an excellent point. It sucks, right? I remember as a kid having, like, at the local library in Chicago, having like a 35-cent fine and not being able to check out a book because I had a 35-cent fine. And, like, I didn't have 35 cents. And they're just like, well, go find it. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I won't read a book today. That sucks. Yeah, you're right, though. That would be amazing in those situations. Once again, amazing recommendations there. This one kind of goes out to the creators here. What are some good free apps, websites that make it easy or low cost, I guess we could throw in there too, for students to create their own comics? And is there something they can draw, type in, possibly has a gallery with word balloons and panel boxes? So simple kind of comic creation apps or websites you know of that we can toss out to some teachers.
So, I mean, I don't know of anything that has kind of built-in word balloons or anything, but I know Procreate is free. So Procreate, if you have a device you can draw on, something like an iPad with a pencil, or you could use your fingers or whatever. My daughter does that a lot. So that's free. And then I'm pretty sure it's still free, and then you can pay for a premium. There's a story creation website called Storybird. I think a lot of teachers use this, and I think they're doing a lot of new content around or creating a lot of templates for making comics.
Thank you. Anybody else have any?
Pixton. Oh,
yeah,
sorry, Adam. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Mike. That's all you.
Pixton.com is one that I have had my students use in the past, which has, you know, the balloons, and it has the, you know, the template images. You can also buy or find online PDFs of just panel layouts, blank panel layouts that you could send digitally to your students, and they could either print them out or on some kind of online paint program they can draw into it themselves, and they could just choose the layout that works for them. If they draw on it, they could just take a picture with their phone and send it right back to you. That's another possible option. If you're, you know, looking for something a little more low tech, give them more hands-on drawing rather than having to cut and paste. But those are a couple of suggestions I would make.
Yeah. Pixton was one I looked at. Storyboard that. Just in kind of doing some research, I know that's almost like of the Bitmoji, where like there's people you can throw in a bunch of different backgrounds. I think Make Beliefs Comics is the same, comics with an X, which is just that kind of same template, right? Of like, you have a background, you have some like standard Bitmoji people, you probably have some word balloons, and then Canva, like Canvas without an S, I know is just kind of like a general, like you can make a birthday card with that, or you could make like a comic with 3 panels. So just in doing some research, but I think also kind of think outside the box. You know, I think Michael's idea is great about like have them do a paper and pen and then take a picture with their Chromebook or their device or their phone and email that in, or submit that to Google Classroom or whatever your portal might be. And I think something we might bring up later about like content and what content can look like is have them get creative. You know, we'll talk about it. I'd like to bring up a poem a little bit by Layli Long Soldier, which was like I reposted it on my Twitter, and I thought it was just this beautiful outside of the box in terms of design. Have kids like make a comic, give them maybe some structure, but then also give them some freedom. And I think our kids are these digital natives who are incredibly creative in what they can do and what they can create. And so I think give them that freedom, even just like if it's in a Google Doc or if it's just in something, I know that they can find really powerful, and they can probably sometimes create something better than the examples we provide them. I know too, I just checked on Procreate. I've been doing some sketching on that, but you know, if your school is one-to-one with iPads, you know, there's a number of different just free drawing apps that you can basically just draw anything. You know, there is a little bit of a learning curve, but there are ones that are incredibly simple that as long as they can put their finger on a screen, they can draw something, you know, pretty simple. And I think also too, that comes with, you know, you can do a nice little mini lesson about like, as good or bad as an artist they think they might be, like, and I always do like a really, really bad drawing to say like, you can draw something with basic shapes and it'll look, you know, you can easily kind of communicate what you want to be, even if you don't think you're a great artist. So that's usually a lesson that's always fun for me, because I draw, it's just, I always boost myself up and how good it looks, even though I know how bad it looks. But, you know, just saying like anyone can be an artist, because art is just shapes that we interpret as something else. So, you know, I think building that confidence in them is a big step for when they're creating their own comics.
Yeah, I was going to add to that too. Like, I've always leaned into using what you already have. So, I mean, you can easily make a comic in like Keynote or PowerPoint. Just you can take pictures of each of people. I hesitate to say that in front of kids now in this digital realm, because I can only imagine the amount of screenshots and word bubbles they're going to be putting over Zoom images that they get. But I think that that's just a cool way to kind of engage it. And like Adam said, like think outside of the box. There's a bunch of different tools we have that we haven't maybe thought about using them that way.
Regine, did you want to add to the creativity?
Yes, there are some free apps that kids can use if they have access to a computer or a phone. There's Comic Book, Strip Designer, Comics Heads, and these apps allow for kids or adults actually to make their own comics. So you can pick a layout, you can pick the bubbles or the captions, and you have the option of either drawing your own figures or maybe adding mock-ups that they already have. So those are really fun. And I've also done the same thing that Michael has done, where I've printed out panels, different shapes, different sizes, and had kids make their stories that way. And also I've had them do it freehand as well.
I can't wait till this video comes out and I can just send the link to this video to any teacher that ever asks me the question about students creating comics in their own classroom, because I think you've all covered it's great. It's great. I think any teacher is going to love that collection of ideas that you all just came up with. There are the last two questions that I have here. The fourth one is very similar to a question we had earlier, but I'll ask it to see if anybody has a different lean on it. And that was, anyone have a bank or list of comics or graphic novels, memoirs, nonfiction that are available free online, right? That's it, like, oh, we could offer some comic memoirs, but like just free online. I think that kind of goes back to everything else we were talking about as far as like ways to get comics for on the cheap. But does anybody else have any, besides like maybe throwing out somebody you know on Instagram or Twitter that maybe talking about some real life stuff that we can, while you think for a second, I know Adam earlier mentioned Lucy Knisley. I know her Instagram is really good with like nonfiction snippets of the things that are going on with her life, especially for the 6-panel kind of swipe comics of little segments of her life. But is there anybody else out there that we know about that we could offer up to teachers?
Tin Pham was doing quarantine comics for a while, and then recently started kind of sharing a bigger comic that I guess he's working on about kind of his family's origins. So it's been really, really just wonderful to see it. And you know, I don't know if he has an intention of publishing it as a book, but right now it's all on his Instagram.
Who
And
is that?
Its name is Tin Pham. So it's THIENPHAM. I might be getting the I and E mixed up. I'm a little dyslexic, so, but it's there, and he's on Instagram. So
Thank you.
mm-hmm.
On Facebook, shout out to a friend of ours who is a teacher and a comic artist, Chris Pierce, Pearce. He does a web strip that he primarily posts, I think, on his social media. He's got a Twitter, and I think he puts everything on Facebook. It's called Teachable Moments, and it's basically strips about moments in his experience at school with his students. He's been doing it for a long time, and I think he's now starting to kind of make mini comics and push a little bit harder on you know, distributing it. But you can read, I think, pretty much everything he's written so far and drawn so far on his Facebook page. Again, it's Pearce, Chris Pierce. So check that out.
Thanks, Michael.
I would suggest Whit Taylor. Probably she's more so for older kids, maybe high school, maybe juniors or seniors. But she has a regular like slice of life comic that she does on Instagram. Also, another one that may be also for maybe older kids, but maybe let's say freshman to senior in high school. And that's Jewel Smith. She has a comic called Half Procentric, and so that's half HAFRO centric. And that's on Instagram as well. She also has full comics, but she has been doing a regular strip on Instagram too. And Micheline Hess, how could I forget? Micheline Hess, she occasionally will do a memoir, but she'll also do some fantasy on Instagram and Facebook.
Was that first name you said, was that Whit, like WHIT?
Yes.
Okay. I'm writing these down too. I'm like, I gotta go follow all these people now.
Okay.
I also forgot there are two comic creators, Nika Song and Jen Olivera, I think her last name. They combined together and are putting together young reader comics. It's called Sunday Haha. And so they invite, I have one coming up, they invite all kind of like kid lit comic creators to contribute and are sending it out. And it's just a 4-panel, like they're simple, like ages 5 and up appropriate. And it's really great. My daughter and I have looked at a few, and it's a great way to just bring comics in. It's free, and some of creators that have books out that you could buy, but it's not tied to anything that you need to know. So.
And I think too, not necessarily memoir stuff, but I know just to plug some more like online resources. I know I said Gumroad. I think that there's a kind of curation process you really kind of need to look through, and sometimes the gateway is paying for something. But usually they're pretty reasonable when creators are putting stuff on there. I know a lot of times there's pay what you want. So you could get access free and then go back and pay that creator, or a lot of times they're just offering materials for free. So definitely check those out. Other things like Webtoon and Tapas are apps where there's a wealth of resources, but again, the problem can also become just like wading through a lot of those. Stuff like Webtoon. You found, I know there's a book. It's forthcoming. I ordered it. It's a Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. If I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and that started on Webtoon, and so a lot of that content is on Webtoon. However, there's also print versions available. Same thing with like books like Check Please. Started kind of in this digital phase and then moved into print versions. So definitely look for those of like what are the kind of famous web comics that eventually became print editions. I think looking there, and then I couldn't go on a panel without plugging Weird Enough Productions and their book The Uncommons. So that's Tony Weaver and his crew have been doing some amazing work, especially in terms of coupling graphic novel novels that center around kind of media literacy and other kind of key lessons in terms of social emotional learning. And also there's resources, written resources, lessons, and other things. So Tony's been doing some really amazing things with education and the content that he's been creating. I know he made a lot of those materials free or easily available to teachers and other educational professionals over quarantine. So definitely check that. And shoot him a message, and I'm sure he can help you out with those. But yeah, those are, again, not memoirs, but a lot of those books are either very personal stories or stories that are close to the hearts of the creators, if not like actual being autobiographical.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. If you look at if you go to Webtoons and you search under like the slice of life column, there's a good chance that quite a few of those are going to be like informed by the writers' lives in some kind of way. I kind of took this question when I first saw it because it says comics, graphic novels, or memoirs, so I didn't take it as like they have to be that. So when I did my little 5-minute research to kind of like say who I wanted to shout out, I didn't necessarily stick to that. But one that I think she's a great follow, or they're a great follow on Instagram, local Chicago artist Bianca Shanice. They're kind of getting a little bit of backlash recently, so it'd be nice to get some support for them because it's been really cool to kind of see like the work that she does as a creator, as a a Black queer woman who's also a Black goth woman too. So like some of that stuff kind of bleeds in there, which is like a lot of talking around like anxiety, depression, things about what it's like to live in a Black body as well. So she would be great. Zen pencils, I think, is awesome. I've used Zen pencils in my classroom a lot. So he's a New Zealand, I believe, Australian artist who takes like poetry and famous monologues from stuff and turns it into comics. So he did like Phenomenal Woman. That's a really cool comic. He took Invictus and made that into like a story about Nelson Mandela. Bunch of stuff that's really cool. I have to shout out Agents of the Realm. My friends on this call know that I'm a sucker for stuff that I probably wouldn't be the target audience for. So stuff like, if you dig Sailor Moon and My Little Pony with a little bit of college angst and Felicity, some of y'all are too young for that, who are watching this probably. You would dig Agents of the Realm. It's a really cool book. And then on webcomics, there's a story called, or a strip called Exception. That's ACCEPTION. It's starring this boy who's like a queer fashionista set in a high school. Really cool story. And again, all these are things that are free. And I also want to follow to what Adam Ebert said. Check Please is an amazing, amazing book. And if you want something that's like kind of light, but also just heartwarming, I think you dig into that story.
Thank you, Renell. Guys, I think we're out of time here. We are, that was the quickest 45 minutes possibly of a long time for me in this quarantine where time means nothing and everything is never ending. So once again, I want to thank our amazing panelists today, Michael, Nidhi, Regine, Adam, Ronell. Thank you so much for being here at this ReadPop Metaverse digital panel and sponsored by LitX. And we hope that teachers can follow us all. And if you have any questions, please reach out, contact us. If something we said spoke to you or you have any further questions, we're happy to be here, be a resource for you in these weird, difficult times. And thank you so much for being with us right now and having this conversation with us.
Thank you. Bye.